Hello YouTube fam, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Tina and I make videos on lifestyle, home, and DIY projects every single week. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day and are ready for another DIY video. Today's video is all about my favorite DIYs that I like to do to relax and are a stress reliever. This is actually a video that I've been wanting to do for quite a while, especially since I know a lot of you guys like to watch my videos to relax and decompress. And that just makes my heart so happy just knowing that you guys watch my videos and enjoy it and find some calmness and peace in your day from watching them. And for these projects, I'm trying out some new techniques, so I hope that it sparks some inspo in you guys to try them out as well. And I want to thank BetterHelp for sponsoring today's video, which ties in perfectly with today's theme. Mental health is something that is super important to me, and if you guys didn't know, I actually studied psychology in college, so it's definitely something that I prioritize, and between juggling my work as well as my channel and my personal life on top of everything that's going on in the world right now, it does get a little overwhelming. But a big part of managing my mental health is talking to a therapist, so depending on what your needs are, BetterHelp is here to assess that and match you with a licensed professional. And I found their sign up process to be super easy, so all you have to do is take a quick questionnaire and they'll connect you with someone within 48 hours. And to clarify, this is not a crisis line or self-help, this is professional counseling done securely online, so you can feel confident in finding a counselor since they have a broad network with over 15,000 counselors. Their counselors are super knowledgeable and also have a broad range of expertise which you might not be able to find locally. And BetterHelp is available worldwide, so no matter where you are, you're able to connect to your counselor at any time. So my favorite way to talk to my counselor is actually through messages, and they always have a timely response and thoughtful answers for me. But you could also schedule weekly phone calls or video sessions, and those are also super helpful. And I find this just to be so much more convenient and comfortable than sitting in a typical waiting room with traditional therapy. And BetterHelp is really committed in finding you guys the right match, so if you need to make any changes, you can do so pretty easily. Using BetterHelp is actually more affordable than traditional therapy, and they do have financial aid available. So if you guys are interested in checking them out, make sure that you visit betterhelp.com/Tina. That's betterhelp.com/Tina, and you can get 10% off of your first month. It truly is such an amazing service, and I'll have all the information down below. This first project is a fun one, so let's go ahead and get started. Hello from VoiceOver Tina. As you guys probably may or may not already know, one of my favorite materials to work with is air dry clay, and I just find it to be such a therapeutic process whenever I work with it. And today we're actually going to try out a new method that you guys suggested to me. To give our clay a fun pattern, I'm using coffee grounds, and I'm going to add that right onto the clay. I'm first going to create a small flat layer of it and then sprinkle on some coffee grounds, and then I'm just going to add on another layer and then more coffee grounds. So I did watch a couple of videos by Yana Kunnert as well as Mix It Up Marcy. So that's how I learned more about this technique, and they gave such helpful tips, so I'm going to link their videos down below. I'm going to roll it all together, and what the coffee is going to do is to give our clay a nice speckling effect, much like you would find in traditional ceramic pieces. And this was honestly starting to look like a cookies and cream ice cream to me, which is my favorite by the way, but I thought it was looking really cute. If you don't have coffee at home, you can also try using peppercorn, and I think that looks amazing as well. And while I was rolling it, I could tell the coffee was making the clay a little bit more dry to work with, so I knew that I would have to work really quickly with this. We're going to go ahead and roll this into a slab, and you guys already know the drill. We're going to add some popsicle sticks on both sides to get it nice and even. In case you haven't seen this hack, I go over my best air dry clay tips in a video, so if you missed that, be sure to check it out, especially if you're a beginner to clay, and this is also going to be linked below. The speckling becomes a little less apparent the more I rolled it, so if you want a lot of speckling, feel free to add in even more coffee grounds. With a small bowl, I'm going to use that to trace out a circle shape, and this is just going to be the perfect size to create a small bowl. And once you lift it up, more than likely you're going to notice some little imperfections, so I'm going to use some slip to smooth it out. And since this clay does have speckling, I was careful to use more of the watery part of the slip so that I wouldn't lose that pattern underneath. Now I'm using a glass cloche, and this is going to serve as our mold, but feel free to use whatever you have at home. and this is where the trouble started happening. So once I actually pressed it down, the clay started to crack, which I was really afraid would happen since I noticed the clay was already getting pretty dry. And cracking is one of the worst things that could happen when you're working with air dry clay, but not to worry, we can easily fix it with some slip. So I did try my best to add some on and smooth it with my fingers, but I found it to be a little bit trickier since the slip does cover up some of that speckling, but I was hoping with a very light sanding later it would help bring some of that back to the surface. I took the cotton off of one side of a Q-tip and I'm going to use that to press onto the edge of the bowl to create these little holes. So here I'm actually pressing it down all the way and I'm trying to space it out as evenly as possible, but this isn't exactly going to create an opening, it's more creating a guide. So I went ahead and used a dotting tool or anything else sharp, and this is actually where I'm going to poke it again to create a perfect hole. And after I went around the whole thing, I just went ahead and let this dry for a few hours. So at this point, you can actually handle the clay without warping the shape, and then I'm just going to remove that from the glass. And I did notice that the holes were not super even, so I took this time to also poke on the other side. Then I'm using a tiny bit more slip to smooth the inside and any other little cracks and imperfections. And to be honest guys, I actually wanted to make a much larger bowl for this project, but since it was drying out so quickly, I knew that making a smaller one would just be better. And as therapeutic as working with clay is for me, something that really stresses me out is cracking. But know that not every project is going to go according to plan. And even as I was working on this, I did have to take a step back and remind myself that I can adjust it as I go along. DIYing is a never-ending learning process to improve with each project. So if you're working on a project and things don't go right, just know that I'm right there with you, cheering you on to finish it, and I know it's going to come out amazing. So here's our piece all dry and it's looking pretty cute. All I need to do now is thread some raffia through. So as you can see, I'm just looping that through the holes around the rim of the bowl, and this raffia really adds a beautiful natural element and also a little bit of softness to the piece. This look has been very trendy in home decor lately, and I really love the balance between the natural raffia against the faux speckled ceramic bowl. This coffee technique was so much fun to try out, and the end result looks amazing. For this next project, I was headed off to Joann and I was in search of some new yarn just because I wanted some new colors, and I was really on the hunt for some chunky knit yarn and they were having a sale, so this was just the perfect time to go.
What's the game plan?
I need more chunky yarn and I really hope they have some.
How chunky is chunky?
Wait, that's all the yarn they have? Oh my god. So we were back from Joann's and I wanted to do a little haul just to show you guys the types of yarn that I grabbed. So we ended up actually going to 2 Joann stores and I ended up finding kind of what I needed. So this first one is kind of like a ribbon yarn, and I thought this was very interesting just because it is really chunky, but as you can see it's also very flat, but I thought that would look really nice in a weaving. And it's like hollow in the middle here, so this is a very interesting type of yarn. So I guess you would use it to make hats and scarves, and this was just interesting, so I think it'll look really nice in our weaving. And then I grabbed a whole bunch of new colors. So this color is so beautiful. Oh my god, look how gorgeous and bright it is. It's such a rich yellow orange and I'm just obsessed with it. And I kind of grabbed more of like fall tone colors. So this one has different types of colors woven into it. So you have some oranges, some greens, even some purples woven in here. So it's a nice like brownish orange color. For most of my projects, I've been using this yarn and just unraveling them and then using one strand so that it gets super chunky. But ideally, I want to use more of this type of yarn. It's just harder to find and they only had this color that I could use for my wall hanging. So I think I'm gonna have to go online and buy more yarn like this. And if you guys know what this type of yarn is actually called, please let me know in the comments. My search for chunky yarn would probably be easier if I knew the technical term of this type of yarn, so that would be much appreciated. So this is going to be actually the second wall hanging that I've ever made, and I'm going in with a little bit different of a game plan than the first time. These colors are going to look so gorgeous and I cannot wait to see how it turns out. To set up our loom, all I'm doing is looping our thread up and down, and this is actually called the warp threads, and I'm going to space them out evenly across the loom. This hanging is going to be a little bit smaller, so I didn't go the full width of the loom, and I would also suggest to center it, but I totally did not think about it here, so learn from my mistakes. Then I'm adding on a folded piece of paper at the bottom, and this is going to serve as a spacer. Then I'm creating a footer, so we're going to do a basic plain weave. So I'm using the plastic needle that came with the kit, and I'm going to weave it back and forth for 12 rows. And if you missed the video where I did my first wall hanging with this loom, I got it from IKEA from the kids section. It is now discontinued, but I will link a few other options down below. So along the bottom, I wanted to create some fringe, so I'm using a macrame rope, and I'm actually going to split them apart and then brush them out so that it looks more like a cord and not a rope. But this actually took me a long time to do, so I definitely would not recommend doing this and just buying actual cording instead. But this is what I had, so it's what I worked with. I'm adding on the macrame all along the bottom row by creating RAFFIA knots. So we're going to take the ends and weave it through the middle of 2 warp threads, and then we're going to pull it through underneath, and this essentially is going to look like a lark's head knot. I really like this color, so I thought it would look really nice as a fringe, and we're just going to leave it here and cut it off later. Now I'm taking a marker and mapping out the first part of my design, so this is super helpful as a guide. So for the very bottom, I'm going to weave through with that chunky red yarn with a plain weave. And I did find out from you guys over on Instagram that this is called wool roving, which essentially is like long spun fibers of wool, and they are just so chunky and dreamy and add so much dimension to a piece. For the next row, I actually started it 1 thread over to follow along the design, and this is going to create a staggered look. We're going to switch things up and start doing a sumac weave, and this is basically a slanted stitch. So all I'm doing is basically wrapping it behind the next warp thread and then pulling it through. So you can see as I'm moving to the right, I'm just wrapping it around the next one, and this is going to create a nice slanted stitch going in one direction. Once we get to the end, we're going to wrap that around twice, and then we're going to move in the opposite direction to create more slanted sumac weaves. And since these 2 rows are going in opposite directions, it's going to look like a braid, and I think it just looks so beautiful. Another technique you can do with roving is just weaving a plain weave like normal. Then you can go back and pull up each one of the sections like so, and this is going to give you more of a bubble look. I learned a lot of these techniques from Spruce and Linen, and I actually just found out that she has a shop where she sells some really beautiful weaving supplies, so I'll link that down below. I am majorly considering upgrading and ordering a loom from her because they are so gorgeous, but let me know your thoughts below. So now I'm creating some more plain weaving on the left side here, and for this wall hanging, I wanted to try making more curves instead of very flat lines like I did in my first weaving. So as I'm working on this side, you're going to see that I'm tapering it off into the opposite direction, and this is going to create a little valley. My vision was to create a sunset scenery, so these are going to be the 2 little mountains in the front. I wanted this to have a lot of texture, so I'm going to add some RAFFIA loops. So first we're starting off with a couple of rows of plain weave, and to start our loop, I'm just going to take the piece of the yarn and I'm going to place it behind one of the warp threads, and this is going to create a little loop or a little backwards D. Then taking the remaining yarn on the other side, I'm going to create a loop, and then this is going to feed through the D on the left side, and then we're going to tighten it. So this is our first little loop, and then we're just going to move on to the next warp thread and just repeat the same process of creating these tiny loops. Loom weaving is super therapeutic, and it's also very forgiving, so if you mess anything up, you're able to just undo it and start over. Plus, it's one of those projects that you just pick up anytime you want, and then you can do it while you're watching a show or a movie. And if you're anything like me, it might seem intimidating at first. It actually took me months before I even touched my loom, and crafting should really be something that you enjoy and not stress over. So if you're in that same boat of getting intimidated before trying new projects, I would suggest doing a smaller version of the project first before tackling it head on. And that's exactly what I'm doing here with this smaller scale project, just to try out new techniques and materials to get me comfortable. And speaking of stressing out, I actually was not very happy with how the weave on the left side was looking, so I ended up just undoing the whole thing. And usually I would cut this out of the video, but I wanted to show you guys that it's okay to start over because it's all part of the learning process. I know that perfection is not realistic, and especially as a content creator here on YouTube, I want my projects to be perfect all the time, and I do feel the pressure to make everything look amazing for you guys, but I know that you all still love and support what I share on here regardless, so I have to remind myself that from time to time. But I love showing you guys the process because I'm learning so much as well, but I love showing you guys the whole process because nothing is perfect, and I'm learning as I'm going along as well. So in its place, I actually got some real roving, and as you can see, it is super chunky. So we're gonna go ahead and split it up and then just do a flat weave with it. For even more interest, I'm going to take another color of the roving and we're gonna combine these together. So you're gonna see that I have 2 strands of brown and then 1 strand of the orange, and all you need to do is just twist them together to get this two-toned look. I'm doing some more sumac weaving with this, and you can already tell how much texture it's adding in, especially with the multicolored yarn. It's looking so much better now, and this is definitely something that I want to experiment with more. So now you guys can see that we have 2 cute little mountains that curve into a valley, and now it's time to add in our sun. So as a guide, I'm using a lid to trace out a half circle, and then with my yellow yarn, I'm going to add in some more RAFFIA loops. So I'm just looping this along, and as I'm working on this, I can actually adjust the yarn and move it up and down, and this way we can get a really nice curve to create the sun. And now to finish this off, we're going to fill in the background. So I'm using a chunky white yarn, and we're going to do a combination of plain weave as well as sumac weave. And for this entire project, I only did 3 types of weavings, and this is just so simple to put them all together and kind of go with the flow and create a scenery on the wall hanging. This definitely took a lot of trial and error, but I'm really loving how it's all coming together. So once we're done, we're going to go ahead and just clean up the back, and I'm just knotting some loose ends as well as threading it through the back. And all we need to do now is cut it off of our loom, so I'm just cutting off each one of the warp threads, and then I'm going to knot it at the top as well as the bottom. So for the top, I'm actually using a stick, and you can just find one outside, and this is just a great way to switch things up from using a regular wooden dowel. It adds in such a nice organic feel, and all I'm doing is just looping it through the top of the wall hanging with that chunky yarn to finish it off. I am super happy with how this little sunset wall hanging came out. There's so much color and texture, and I had so much fun creating it with you guys. Loom weaving has quickly become something that I'm getting more and more interested in it, and I cannot wait to try out my next project with it. I'm so happy with how those projects came out, and if any of you guys are wondering if the air dry clay still smells like coffee, it definitely does. And if any of you guys have tried out that project before, let me know in the comments if it still smells like coffee after a while. I'm interested to see how that goes. And of course, let me know in the comments which one was your favorite. I would love to hear your thoughts on them. And a huge thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring today's video. If you guys are interested in checking them out and getting 10% off of your first month, be sure to click the link down below. If you're inspired by any of the products from today's video, be sure to tag me over on Instagram, and also get connected and follow along because I post on there every single day. And a big thank you for those of you guys who tag me over on Instagram. I love seeing all of your beautiful projects. I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you for hanging out with me today. Stay inspired, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.